Welcome to the deep dive. So you've sent us some really interesting sources this time, all swirling around this big question. Virtual workspace or the traditional office?
Yeah, it's a decision lots of businesses are grappling with right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So for you, our listener, we're going to go beyond just listing pros and cons.
Yeah.
We really want to dissect the key things you need to consider for your specific situation based on the info you provided.
Mm-hmm. And the way we work has changed so fast, hasn't it? The virtual office is, well, it's definitely a serious contender now against the old bricks and mortar way.
Right.
So our mission here in this deep dive is to really pull out the most important factors from the material to help you figure out which model truly fits your needs, your goals.
And one source that's particularly interesting is from Brandook. What's useful there is that they actually provide both virtual and traditional spaces.
Oh, that's interesting. So they see it from both sides.
Exactly. Gives their perspective, a bit more weight, maybe some nuance we can really get into. Okay, so let's jump right in. This whole idea of a virtual office. What are we actually talking about here? What does it look like day to day?
Well, it's not just, everyone working in their pajamas, though maybe sometimes. It's more structured than that. It's about using digital tools, communication apps, collaboration software, admin systems, to basically build a legitimate business presence. Often this includes things like a proper business address, maybe phone answering services, all without needing that central physical building.
Okay.
It's about setting up that professional front, that operational capability, but doing it well digitally.
Right. So it's not just work from anywhere chaos. There's a definite structure or services involved.
Absolutely. A typical package, you'd expect to see things like a business address, for mail, looking official, professional phone answering, so calls get handled properly. And often, this is key, access to physical meeting rooms or office space when you need it. So you can book a room for that important client meeting, for example.
Gotcha. Okay, so you get some key perks of a physical presence, the address, the call handling, but without that constant drain of rent and utilities.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of costs, that seems like a huge driver for people looking at this model, right? The potential savings.
Oh, absolutely huge. It's fundamental for many. By, getting rid of the need to lease and maintain a physical space, the rent, the bills, the cleaning, repairs businesses can save a significant amount on their regular running costs.
Right.
And the sources you gave us, including Brandook's insights, they suggest businesses often take that saved money and put it back into things like, say, marketing or R&D.
Oh.
It's about shifting resources away from just keeping the lights on in a building towards actually growing the business.
That makes a lot of sense. Freeing up cash to actually fuel growth.
Mm-hmm.
But to make this all work smoothly, there's got to be a big reliance on technology, yeah. You mentioned cloud platforms.
Yeah.
What does that actually mean for a business?
You're spot on. Tech is the backbone. We're talking about cloud-based platforms, basically software and services you access online. This lets teams work together on documents, projects, whatever, even if they're miles apart.
Okay.
Think video conferencing for meetings, project management tools to keep everyone aligned, and tasks on track, even when they're scattered geographically. These digital tools are like the essential plumbing of a virtual office.
But relying so heavily on tech must bring its own challenges, too.
Exactly. It's not all smooth sailing. Keeping that team spirit, that shared company culture alive, that can be tougher when you're not seeing each other every day.
I can imagine.
And then there's the huge one, cybersecurity and keeping data private. That's critical. You need really strong measures like encryption, access controls to protect sensitive info when it's flying around online.
Mm-hmm. Definitely something to take seriously.
And finally, managing relationships with clients mainly online. It just requires a slightly different skill set, a different approach maybe.
Okay, key things to watch out for. But it sounds like for certain types of businesses, maybe startups, freelancers, the virtual model could be really, really appealing.
Yeah, the sources suggest it's often a great fit for startups trying to keep those initial costs down.
Yeah.
Or freelancers who need that professional image without renting an office. And remote consultants, obviously. Their work is often location independent anyway.
Makes sense.
Now, let's maybe dive into some of the specific advantages that the material really highlights. Flexibility is one that keeps popping up.
It does. The whole work from anywhere thing sounds pretty good.
It's a big one. Being able to operate from almost anywhere gives amazing flexibility. That can really help with work-life balance for employees, right? And it makes collaborating across different time zones, even globally, much easier. It breaks down those old geographical barriers.
And the cost effectiveness, like we said, that's got to be huge, especially if you're just starting out where margins are tight.
Totally. Getting rid of those big overheads frees up cash. Cash you can then use strategically for, growth, innovation, maybe even offering better salaries to attract top people.
Plus, you can still look professional, right?
Yeah.
Even without the fancy office building. That virtual address, the phone answering service.
That's a really key point. It lets smaller businesses, even solo operators, present a really polished, trustworthy image to clients and partners. It boosts their credibility.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing is scalability. Virtual offices seem pretty good for businesses planning to grow.
How so? What does that look like?
Well, it gives you agility. You can expand into new cities, new countries, hire more people without the massive cost and hassle of finding and setting up new physical offices. It's just much more nimble.
Yeah, I can see that. Less commitment, easier to scale up or even down if needed. And for the employees, no commute. That must be a massive perk.
Huge. Think about the time saved, the money saved on travel, petrol, whatever, not to mention just less stress starting and ending the day.
Right. That saved time could easily translate into more productivity.
Right.
Just, a better quality of life.
Exactly. And linking this to the bigger picture, virtual offices can be really good for business continuity too.
Ah, okay. Tell me more about that.
Well, think about disruptions, right? Like extreme weather, transport strikes, maybe even a health crisis. If your team is set up to work remotely, the business can keep running much more smoothly because you're not dependent on one physical place that might suddenly become inaccessible.
That's a really strong point, especially these days.
Yeah.
Very relevant. And what about finding people? Talent.
Yeah, another big plus. If you're not limited to hiring people who live near a specific office, you can tap into a global talent pool. You get access to way more skills, more diversity, people you just wouldn't find locally.
Opens things up massively.
And one last thing, you often get access to physical stuff when you need it, like booking a meeting room for a few hours or getting some admin support on demand without paying for it full time.
Right. Pay-as-you-go resources. Okay, so that's a pretty compelling list of advantages. But we did touch on downsides earlier. What are some of the main hurdles the sources flag up for virtual setups?
Okay, yeah, challenges. Cybersecurity and data protection, that's a biggie. When everyone's accessing company data from different locations, different devices, the risk of breaches, unauthorized access, it just goes up. You need really solid security.
Definitely requires serious thought and probably investment. And keeping communication flowing, keeping the team feeling connected. That can be harder too, right?
It can, yeah. You lose those spontaneous chats by the water cooler. Misinterpretations over email or chat can happen more easily. Communication might be delayed. It just means you have to be much more deliberate about how you communicate.
Mm-hmm. And building those strong work relationships, that company culture,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that would be tougher without the day-to-day in-person stuff.
Exactly. Those informal networking moments, just building rapport. It's harder virtually. And if your team is spread across different time zones, wow, coordination can become a real headache. Scheduling meetings, keeping projects moving efficiently. It's a logistical puzzle sometimes.
Oh, I can only imagine the scheduling nightmares. What else should businesses be wary of?
The blurring of lines between work and home life, that's a common one. When your office is also your living room, it can be really hard to switch off. People might end up working longer hours, getting stressed. You need clear boundaries.
Yeah, that work-life balance needs conscious effort.
Definitely. And also perception. In some industries, let's be honest, a purely virtual setup might still be seen as, maybe less credible or stable than a traditional office.
Right. That physical presence still carries weight in some sectors.
It can. And related to that, maintaining a strong, unified company culture when everyone's remote. It takes real proactive effort. It's harder to build that shared identity, those values, when you're not physically together.
Which could lead to people feeling a bit disconnected,
Oh.
isolated.
Yeah, potentially. Feelings of isolation, maybe reduced team cohesion. These are real risks if you don't manage it carefully. You need things like virtual social events, dedicated channels for non-work chat, like Brand Nook apparently emphasizes from their experience.
Okay.
So yeah, lots of benefits with virtual, but definitely critical challenges to think about and plan for. Now, should we pivot to the other side, the traditional office space?
Yeah, let's do that. The traditional office, it's what most people probably still picture when they think workplace.
Right.
It's a specific physical location where everyone gathers.
Pretty much. A dedicated physical space for employees, for teams, designed to provide a structured environment. It's the central hub.
Right. A place with, desks, meeting rooms, maybe some shared facilities.
Exactly. You've got your individual workspaces, meeting rooms, usually with AV stuff, shared areas like kitchens or break rooms, and often a reception area for visitors.
And a big part of this setup is that it naturally encourages direct face-to-face communication, right? Which can really help with teamwork, company culture.
Definitely. Those spontaneous conversations in the hallway, quick check-ins at someone's desk, you just don't get that same dynamic virtually. It helps build relationships, maybe even a stronger sense of belonging.
Yeah, you can't really schedule spontaneity, can you? And traditional offices, they come in all shapes and sizes, obviously. From a tiny startup in a shared suite to a huge corporation in a skyscraper.
Absolutely. The scale varies massively, but the core idea is the same,
Right.
a shared physical HQ. So what are the main advantages that usually come with this traditional model? A professional presence is often mentioned first.
Yeah, it definitely feels more solid, maybe, established.
I think so. A physical office often reinforces a company's credibility. It sends a message of stability, of long-term commitment, especially to clients or partners. It can build trust in a way that's sometimes harder for a purely virtual business, particularly in older, more traditional sectors.
And the structured environment itself can be good for focus, right?
Yeah.
Clearer lines between work and home.
That's a big plus for many. That physical separation helps minimize home distractions, makes it easier to switch into work mode during office hours, and then properly switch off afterwards.
And we touched on this, but the in-person collaboration, that's a major advantage.
Huge. Being able to have those spontaneous discussions, brainstorm around a whiteboard, make quick decisions face to face, it can really speed things up and spark ideas in ways that virtual tools sometimes struggle to replicate fully.
Yeah, reading body language, the energy in the room.
Exactly. It enhances understanding, rapport, creativity.
Yeah.
And from a management angle, having everyone in one place can make oversight a bit easier.
How so?
Well, it can be simpler to monitor progress, give immediate feedback, sort out problems quickly when they pop up, maybe helps with accountability, keeping workflows smooth.
Okay. And just the simple convenience factor.
Yeah, don't overlook that. In a traditional office, people usually have reliable, instant access to everything they need: fast internet, printers, files, meeting rooms, no messing out, which boosts efficiency.
Okay, so definitely some strong arguments for the traditional setup too.
Yeah.
But it's not perfect either. What are the main downsides?
Well, the big one is cost. High operational expenses, rent or mortgage, utilities, maintenance, furniture, insurance, taxes. It adds up to a lot. Especially for smaller businesses, it can really squeeze the budget.
Right. Costs that are mostly avoided or at least massively reduced with a virtual model. And flexibility or the lack of it.
That's another key challenge. Traditional office leases are often long-term commitments. Work schedules might be quite rigid. It makes it harder to adapt quickly if the market changes or if employees really want more flexible ways of working.
And the commute. We mentioned the benefit of no commute for virtual, so the flip side.
Exactly. The daily grind, the time, the stress, the cost of commuting, it can really impact employee morale, productivity, that work-life balance we talked about.
Definitely a big factor for many people.
Yeah.
And it limits who you can hire, doesn't it?
It does. Your talent pool is basically restricted to people who live within a reasonable commute or who are willing to relocate. You potentially miss out on amazing talent just because they live somewhere else.
That's a significant limitation in today's world.
It really is. And finally, just the sheer hassle and cost of upkeep. Keeping a physical office running smoothly takes time and money.
You mean like cleaning, repairs, things breaking down?
Yeah, all that stuff. Routine maintenance, unexpected problems. It drains resources, both time for staff who have to deal with it and money from the business.
Okay, so we've laid out the pros and cons for both virtual and traditional models. We've looked at what they are, how they work. Now for the crunch question. How does a business actually decide which one is right for them, given all these trade-offs?
Right, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the truth is, there's no single best answer. It really truly depends on the individual company's situation, their needs, their resources, their industry, their plans for the future.
Okay, so let's break down those deciding factors. Maybe start with the most obvious one for many. Money, the financial side.
Yeah, finances are almost always front and center. As we've said, traditional offices come with significant ongoing costs, rent, utilities, etc. Virtual offices are generally much lighter on the budget, cutting out a lot of that overhead. You absolutely have to do a realistic comparison of those costs.
And think beyond just the monthly bills, right? Think about what else you could do with that money if you saved it on office space.
Precisely. Those savings from going virtual could be reinvested into things that actually grow the business, better marketing, more R&D, new tech.
Hmm.
And the sources suggest, virtual might be great for cash-strapped startups or small businesses, whereas a bigger, established company that needs that physical presence for clients, well, maybe traditional still makes sense for them. It really comes down to crunching your own numbers and figuring out your financial priorities.
Makes total sense.
Yeah.
Okay, next up, the business model itself and maybe the industry you're in.
Yeah, this is critical. Some industries just lend themselves more to needing a physical space. Think about law firms, accountants, doctors, places where clients come in regularly. Maybe there are specific facilities needed or regulations demand it.
Right, hospitality too.
Yeah,
You need that physical space to deliver the service, build trust, meet compliance rules.
exactly. But then you have other industries, digital marketing, lots of tech companies, consultants, they can often run perfectly well, maybe even better, in a virtual setup using digital tools for everything.
Hmm.
So you've got to ask, what does my industry, my specific business operation, actually demand?
So it's not just what's possible, but what's expected, what's needed for credibility and function in your specific field. Okay, what about flexibility? Now, that came up as a big pro for virtual.
It's a huge factor, yeah.
No.
If your business values being agile, if you want to offer remote work, if you want to hire people from anywhere, then a virtual model, or maybe even a hybrid mix, look at pretty attractive.
Helps with that work-life balance goal, widens the talent pool.
Definitely. But on the flip side, if your work involves very specific structured processes, lots of hands-on teamwork in person, or frequent client visits to your space, then maybe that structured traditional office is actually better suited to how you need to operate. You've got to weigh up how much flexibility you genuinely need versus how much structure is essential.
And how the team actually works together day to day.
Oh,
Collaboration and communication needs.
absolutely key. Does your team thrive on those spontaneous chats, whiteboarding sessions, quick face-to-face huddles? If so, a traditional office naturally supports that.
That kind of real-time, in-the-room energy.
Exactly. But if your team is already good with tech, comfortable using video calls, shared docs, instant messaging to collaborate effectively, then virtual can work really well. It depends on your team's style, the type of work they do, and how good your remote communication setup is.
Okay, thinking longer term now.
Yeah.
What about future growth? Expansion plans, how does that feed into the decision?
It's super important to think ahead. Traditional offices, with those long leases and fixed space costs, can sometimes make it harder to scale up quickly if you suddenly grow, or even scale down if you use it.
Right, you might be stuck paying for space you don't need or scrambling to find more space.
Exactly. Virtual offices offer way more flexibility there, easier to add people anywhere, expand into new markets without needing new buildings. So you need to consider, what's our long-term growth strategy? Does our workspace model support that or hinder it?
Makes sense. Committing to a big lease might feel risky if you expect rapid change. Okay, final factor, accessing talent and reaching your market.
Yeah, and this is where virtual often shines. By ditching the geographical limits, you can potentially hire the best person for the job wherever they live. Access to a much wider, more diverse pool of skills and experience.
Whereas traditional offices inherently limit you to the local area, more or less.
Yeah. Pretty much, yeah. You're fishing in a smaller pond. So if accessing diverse talent from anywhere or easily expanding your market reach is really important for your strategy, then virtual offers a big advantage.
Okay, wow. We have covered a lot of ground here. We've looked at what virtual and traditional offices actually are, the good, the bad, and then really drill down into the key things a business needs to weigh up to make the right choice for itself.
Yeah, and I think the big takeaway is that this isn't just a simple choice like picking coffee or tea. Choosing your workspace model, virtual, traditional, maybe hybrid decision, it's a major strategic decision. It impacts productivity, team morale, how you operate, and definitely your potential for growth down the line.
And like we kept saying, there's no single right answer for everyone. It's so specific to each business. You really have to sit down and honestly evaluate your finances, your business model's needs, how much flexibility you require, how your teams work best together, your growth plans, and your whole talent strategy.
Absolutely. By carefully thinking through all those interconnected pieces, looking at your own specific situation and goals, you can make a really informed workspace decision, one that's aligned with where you want to take the business.
So as you mull all this over, based on everything we've discussed today, here's a final thought to chew on. Thinking about your own business, or maybe one you know well, What's one core assumption you might be making about your workspace needs? Maybe something you've always taken for granted that actually deserves a second look after this conversation. Perhaps something we've dug into today has maybe challenged a long-held view. Something to think about. Thanks for diving deep with us.